This true story comes to us from John Lewis, a great leader in this nation who died just last month. Many people were sad to lose him and thankful for all the things that he had done to bring about justice and fairness in our nation. He had lived a long and full life asking of himself and asking of all of us to show up for justice, to do what we can and just a little bit more to make sure that there is more fairness in our country. When he was 23 years old, he spoke at the March on Washington with Dr. King.
We are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We're tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again. And then you holler, be patient. How long can we be patient? We want our freedom and we want it now.
John Lewis grew up in a large family, and he would spend time with his aunts and uncles, with his siblings and cousins. There were many children who lived in the neighborhood, and they would play together. This was long before there was a pandemic, and so people could play together and hang out together in person. Mr. Lewis tells us about a time when he was playing outside his Aunt Zenevia's house with about 14 other children when a big storm, arrived. A kind of storm that made him and everyone else afraid. I'm going to tell a story from his perspective, so it's like him talking. So when I say I, it really means John. Aunt Zenevia was the only adult around, and as the sky blackened and the wind grew stronger, she herded us all inside. Her house was not the biggest place around, and it seemed even smaller with so many children squeezed inside. Small and surprisingly quiet. All of the shouting and laughter that had been going on earlier outside had stopped. The wind was howling now, and the house was starting to shake, and we were scared. Even Aunt Zenevia was scared. And then it got worse. Now the house was beginning to sway, and the wood plank flooring beneath us began to bend, and then a corner of the house began lifting up. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. None of us could. This storm was actually pulling the house towards the sky with us in it. That was when Aunt Zenevia told us to clasp hands. Line up and hold hands, she said, and we did as we were told. And then she had us walk as a group towards the corner of the room that was rising. From the kitchen to the front of the house we walked, and the wind was screaming outside, and sheets of rain were beating on the tin roof. And we walked back in the other direction as another end of the house began to lift. And so it went back and forth, 15 children walking with the wind, holding that trembling house down with the weight of our small bodies. Can you imagine what it was like to have been inside that house? Afraid that it might fall apart from the destructive force of the wind and the rain from the whole storm? I'm so glad that John Lewis wasn't alone, that no one there was alone, that he was with his friends and family. I'm so glad that together they figured out a way to save the house, to save their home. When John Lewis was much older, just not that long before he died, he was writing down the story of his whole astounding life, and he wrote these words. More than half a century has passed since that day, and it has struck me more than once over the many years that our society is not unlike the children in that house, rocked again and again, the winds of one storm or another, the walls around us seemingly like they're going to fly apart. It seemed that way in the 1960s at the height of the civil rights movement, when America itself felt as if it might burst at the seams. So much tension, so many storms. But the people of conscience never left the house. They never ran away. They stayed, they came together, and they did the best they could, clasping hands and moving towards the corner of the house that was the weakest. And then another corner would lift, and we would go there. And eventually, inevitably, the storm would subside and the house would stand. But we knew another storm would come, and we would have to do it all over again. And we did. And we still do, all of us, you and I, children holding hands, walking with the wind. Thank you for listening, not really to my story, but to Mr. John Lewis's story.